the president made a very compelling case yesterday, obviously talking about a GLP-1 drug, where he's saying you can buy it for $88 in England and you're paying $1,300 in the United States. I feel like if you can sell it for $88 in England and $42 in India, then why are we the ones who have to pay the full fare here in the United States?
So big pharma, Merck makes the drug, but they cannot sell it directly to the hospital. They cannot sell it directly to your community pharmacist. They have to, for whatever reason, these PBMs control that market. They get a percentage of the total cost of that drug, and they constantly push your insurance company, Medicare Advantage, Medicaid, to choose the higher priced drugs. Their profit margins 50, 60%. 3 of them are on the Forbes top 15 list. And now they're vertically integrated. These PBMs own the pharmacy. They own the insurance company. United Insurance Company has their own PBM. So it is an incestuous process that is controlling healthcare right now. We need more people, though, that are focused on not the next election, but the next generation. This will be a legacy issue for me if we can get our legislation passed to take out these PBMs.
All right, guys, good Tuesday for you. The president in Saudi Arabia arriving overnight there to a huge welcome. I posted some pictures on my Instagram if you're interested. It's so similar to what we dealt with in May of 2017. These guys over there know how to impress, and the president and his team getting an amazing welcome in Saudi Arabia, and I expect it to be the same elsewhere. But it was pretty cool, and that's why I put a bunch of these pictures up on Instagram on my story if you're interested in seeing what I'm talking about, because they literally painted the town Trump. It was pretty cool to see it all happen. And they didn't disappoint again. These guys definitely know how to impress. The president signing a deal already in Saudi Arabia this morning, saying that there'll be a $600 billion investment in the U.S. Take a look.
So as we watch this, we'll see if we get a comment or two in a moment. The Saudis had pledged $600 billion, and the president said, I challenge you to take it to $1 trillion. And we'll see whether or not that's the case. Further down the week in the United Arab Emirates, they have made a $1.4 trillion commitment to invest that amount of money over a period of 10 years here in the United States. So as we said from the beginning, this is business, Dana. The agenda is business, business, business today.
It is business with an undercurrent of national security. I want to pick up on one thing that Hugh Hewitt said, is something that I certainly learned as my time in the White House as well, which is countries that trade together and do business together tend to get along very well. And there you have the photograph of President Trump and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
So you saw $600 billion in Saudi so far. He's already got over $1 trillion in the UAE. I mean, this is a big deal. Again, couple this with all of the other companies that we talked about investing in the U.S. I'm just telling you, it's amazing what the difference is. And people just pocket this. You don't hear the media talking about it. By the way, this morning, inflation came out lower than expected. Again, they almost like, you feel like sometimes in the media that they're begging for things to go wrong. We'll still see when Trump's policies come into effect, as if, God, it was too good. And I don't know why. And gosh, can't there be something negative that we can report on? Here we go. The inflation is down because they all assume that their staid old policies were going to result in something. When Trump comes in, he's disruptive, he's chaotic, and he gets results. And they can't imagine that how can this possibly be? Inflation lower than expected? What do you mean? They can't handle it. By the way, I want to get to Senator Roger Marshall is coming up. He's a doctor. He's a farmer. I mean, this is amazing to talk to him today about everything that's going on. I'm going to get to that. I also need to tell you guys about what's going on in prescription drugs. You're going to hear some stuff that's just truth to power. What's really happening, and I'm going to need to explain this to you. Before I do that, though, I do want to start on a high note. I want to show you a very, very powerful moment. This gentleman, Eden Alexander, the last hostage that Hamas was holding, the American hostage, I should be clear, because there are others, was released yesterday, and show you this very, very sort of emotional, powerful moment from yesterday. Take a look.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Idan!
All right. You can hear his mom's voice there. I mean, just so ecstatic to hear from her son, Wickoff, Steve Wickoff, handing her the phone to talk to him. He thanked President Trump later. Again, this is what leadership looks like in action. So I want to get to what the president did yesterday on prescription drugs. So much going on, right? And this trip, obviously a big deal. I'm going to talk about where we are with the budget and reconciliation and tax cuts with Senator Roger Marshall, because he's not only a doctor and has a farming background, but also is on the Senate Finance Committee. But I want to show you RFK and what he said about what they did yesterday with respect to prescription drugs. Take a look.
Mr. Secretary, Trump says some prices will come down almost immediately. What is the timetable for these price cuts?
Well, there's a series of escalating steps, but you know what? That will bring them down to European levels. Right now, America provides 75% of the pharmaceutical revenues in the world. And we only have 4.2% of the world's population.
Sure.
We're paying in our country, the list price for Ozempic is $1,300 per dose. In London, it's $88. And Democratic and Republican politicians have been talking about for years, we got to end these discrepancies. Nobody has had the courage to do it because of the power of the pharmaceutical lobby on Capitol Hill.
Okay.
In answer to your question, how soon will this happen? It depends on how enthusiastically the drug companies cooperate. There are a series of escalating steps that we will take if they don't cooperate. But we've been meeting with the pharmaceutical companies. They admit that this is something that should have ended a long time ago. And I think they're ready to figure out a way to get there. And they have advantages in this executive order, Stuart.
Okay.
Because we got rid of the PBMs. We got rid of the middlemen. And that's something that they've wanted themselves.
I'm going to have a conversation with Roger Marshall about a lot of this because he's the doctor, and we're going to get to what PBMs are and explain how powerful it is. By the way, if you're watching the video of this, take a look at, as RFK is having this conversation with Stuart Varney, the stock prices are going up. But think about this. There's two things that jump out at me from that interview, aside from the PBM. Number one, RFK's statement there, 74% of the pharmaceutical revenues in the world come from here in America. And yet we're only 4.2% of the population. So in other words, you think about that example again, because that was my second thing. Think about just one of these GLP-1 drugs that people are using for weight loss. $88 in England, $1,300 here. Why are we the ones subsidizing all of this? All of these other countries make deals, and yet we in America get screwed. The president the other day joked about this yesterday when he did this. He was talking about his friend who is taking one of these GLP-1 drugs and said, hey, I flew over to England. I can get it for $88. But that's insane. And look, what Bobby said about this is critical. The power of Big Pharma cannot be overstated. Both parties have been just capitulated and been in the pocket of Big Pharma for decades. They throw around a ton of campaign, and it's not just donations, it's campaign ads, it's lobbyists, it's all sorts of things. If you guys thought that all of this was bad, it's way worse than you think. I mean, this is full on corruption because it's not just the lawmakers. It's big media. All of them. All of them. And yesterday I sent out this tweet, okay? And I just said, you notice the lack of coverage by CEOS on President Trump's prescription drugs because it's funded by Big Pharma. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about that is Mike Allen, who is one of the founders of CEOS, decided that he didn't like that, right? So he writes, this is him. He sent me a message, said, bro, exclamation point, as if we're buddies or friends or bros, which we're not. Disappointed you'd writing something, his words, not mine, you'd writing something that's far from true. In fact, we covered it more, all caps, than most, including prominent coverage in AM with 3, all caps, links to his Truth Social, link and text of Caroline's tweet. So in other words, as long as we link to what the president said, then, well, that's okay. That's cool. Like that's really interesting. And by the way, one of their spokespeople sends out a tweet in response to me showing me how they covered it. And do you know what the headline in the story that they covered it was? Trump's executive order to lower drug prices may not do much of that. Oh, yeah. So they covered it in their little health thing here, but then they crapped all over it. Example after example. And you know what? It proved my point. I appreciate that. Thank you for proving my point that when you do cover it, you basically say, hey, it's not going to happen. Why? Because pharma's so powerful. But here's the thing, just to be fair, it's not just Axios. It's all of them. Read these morning newsletters that everybody reads. They're all funded and paid for by pharma. Do you not think these guys, these reporters, look at their masthead every morning in these newsletters and see who's paying their salaries? And I'm telling you, anecdotal after anecdotal, example after another. People will say they were called in by an editor. I don't need, you can't cover that. You can't do that. We need to tweak this. These guys are going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. This is how they're funded. So it's not just the politicians. It is the lobbyists. It is unbelievable what's happening. And they manipulate the government. They manipulate the prices that are happening all over the place. I'm just telling you guys, understand the impact of what President Trump just did yesterday. It's massive. It's huge. Taking these guys on is a huge, monumental step. And the media will defend it almost as much as members of Congress because they understand that their livelihood is dependent on Big Pharma sponsoring all of their publications, their newsletters, their stories, their ads in the broadcast space. But make no mistake about it. Bobby is absolutely right. They're coming for these guys. And I hope to God that President Trump stays strong on this. And I know that he's got a great team to do that. Mehmet Oz over there at CMS, the Centers for Medicaid, was very clear about what they're trying to do. And remember, the government is a big buyer of all this. So that's a big deal as well. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into Senator Roger Marshall here. Steve Moore is going to come on tomorrow. He'll talk the economy, tariffs, the reconciliation bill, all that kind of stuff. Steve Bannon will be here Friday. Obviously, a great panel on Thursday. Before I get to that, I got to tell you guys, I've said this all along before. If you are looking for a great way to start your morning, Wire2Fish Coffee. Check it out. I love this stuff. I love the taste of it. I've traveled with it. When I went down to Florida for spring break to my mom's, I brought literally a bag of that with me because it's so cool to have it to share with others. When we hosted the morning meeting at my house, I served it for everyone. We had Thanksgiving at our house. I served it for everyone. I loved introducing people to Wire2Fish Coffee. And it's not just because it's a great blend. I love the coffee. That's the medium roast. When I brew it, I usually make a little extra for iced coffee so that I can have it the rest of the week. But it is. The beans are amazing. The flavor's amazing. But it's not just that. This company, go to Wire2Fishcoffee.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not just a great coffee. It's a great company. It was founded by great people. They love Jesus, fishing, and coffee. And I think that's the right order. And when you go check out their company and their values, you know that you can align with them. I feel so good about spending my money on Wire2Fish Coffee because I know that their values align with mine. And 25% of their profits go back to Clean Water Initiative and faith-based initiatives. Don't give your money to woke companies that are going to blow it on liberal causes. Go to Wire2Fishcoffee.com and it's the numeral 2, Wire2Fishcoffee.com. And if you use code WeCare, one word, WeCare, all caps, you can get 10% off your first order. And by the way, if you're a big coffee person, they've now got these economical 5-pound bags, not just the 2-pound bags, so you can stock up. But I'm telling you guys, this is great for everyday coffee. It's great when you have groups over. So go to Wire2Fishcoffee.com, use code WeCare. Speaking of great people, though, you guys know this if you've watched the show forever. My buddy Leo Grillo, what a great guy. This guy rescued a Doberman years ago and started to take care of it and realized I can do a lot more with that. And he started Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Delta Rescue is the largest no-kill sanctuary in the world. Not a shelter, a sanctuary. Leo reminds me of that all the time when I text with him about the great work that they're doing. And he built Delta Rescue into this amazing, amazing facility that takes care of animals of all sizes and shapes and breeds, dogs, cats, horses, you name it. If you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see the videos and see what I'm talking about. But the thing about Delta Rescue is it doesn't rely on government funding or big grants from USAID. No, this is all funded by people like me and you. I have made a personal contribution to Delta Rescue, and I ask you to do the same. Go to deltarescue.org to make a contribution to help sustain the great work that Leo Grillo is doing there. But more importantly, if you see that estate planning kit tab up at the top, click it, download it, think about it, pray on it, because I want to make sure that Delta Rescue stays and endures for generations. And so maybe you have an old 401k or part of your estate that you could talk to a financial planner with right now that could help them in the short term or after you're gone. Make it part of your estate. Go to deltarescue.org to take a look. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in the great senator from the state of Kansas, Dr. Roger Marshall. Senator Marshall, great to see you. Thanks for joining us again.
Sean, it's great to be with you. I know we got some great topics today, and I can't wait to share them with you.
Yeah, that's the thing about Trump world, is that there's never not a lot to talk about. And it was funny because I'm thinking to myself, sometimes we get really lucky with who we've got as a guest. And I'm like, okay, here's a guy who's been a leader in the farming, the ag world, who's a doctor, who's on the finance committee. I was like, holy smokes, I might go out and buy lotto tickets tonight. So let's just start with the tax bill. The House released its sort of framework for a reconciliation bill. They're marking up some stuff today. What is your reaction to what the House is doing and where that is as a jumping off point?
Yeah, so just compliments to Speaker Johnson. I think he's got the cats all herded up and they're going in the right direction. And just nothing but compliments. Sean, I think the tough thing is cutting spending up here.
Yes.
I think that they're doing a great job identifying money for the border, money for the military, and trying to take care of President Trump's priorities. But the tough part up here is cutting spending. And I'm sitting here looking at this $36 trillion national debt that we have, that we're going to spend $2 trillion more than we took in this year. So I think that's the tough part here. And hopefully over on the Senate side, maybe we can help work towards a balanced budget.
All right, so let's take this in pieces. Let's start with the tax provisions, because I know you've been a leader in this effort. You've been talking about overtime relief, folks. You've introduced legislations to provide folks relief on overtime. So let's just think about this from a standpoint, like priority-wise, right? I think the idea is to codify and make permanent the 2017 tax cuts that President Trump passed, but then also to add in some of these. So you got no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, your effort among others to provide relief on overtime. Walk me through kind of like just focus on the tax side for a second. Where do you see the priorities and how close is the Senate to the House?
Yeah, Sean. So I think you nailed it. I think first priority is to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. And that's worth about $2,000 for an average family back home. If we don't make those permanent, a family's going to pay $2,000 more a year in taxes. And then you look at the three big ones that President Trump has talked about: no tax on tips, on overtime, and on Social Security. And it's hard for me to say which one of those is more important than the other. And I think what we're going to end up doing is maybe making these just good for 3 or 4 years rather than 10 years. We'll try to get a little bit of every one of those and help fulfill the president's priorities. I'm focused on the overtime bill. That's what.
Why is that? I like, what is it that in your experience, in your background, that makes you really champion that effort in particular?
Yeah, Sean. So I remember my first job off the farm was working at a sale barn. And it just seems like it was yesterday. I wasn't quite 16. I lied about my age. My brother was out there. This was a weekend job. And we would work 12, 16, 24-hour shifts. And anything after 8 hours was overtime. And boy, we'd stay there and keep working until we just couldn't work anymore. And I remember that first paycheck, and I was waiting for all that overtime money. And I looked down there and I saw how much extra the government took out of my paycheck. So I put myself through college, paid for my first car. My dad said, you can have any car you want as long as you can pay cash for it. I put myself through college, through medical school. And those were all summer jobs where I would try to work overtime. That was the golden time when you would get a time and a half. So just to see the government take all that money out of your paycheck, if you weren't a Republican yet, that's when I became a Republican.
So the thing that I always find interesting about tax provisions is that you can always manipulate things. So for example, if you pass no tax on tips, right? What are people going to do? They're going to want to shift as much as their pay to a tip rather than whatever. And I also I'm getting tired of going to stores where every time I buy anything, they flip the little thing over to me and give me Catholic guilt and be like, here's the way you pay for it. And now I'm suddenly paying, a tip on every transaction. But I guess the broader point that I'm making, Senator, is it always feels like that's going to manipulate the system. So if you say no tax on overtime, do we start to get people who then focus everything on overtime on 8 hours shifts versus 40? Or do companies start saying, great, Senator Marshall, you're now a management employee and we don't have to pay you overtime? In other words, they'll figure out a way to undermine the system.
Yeah, Sean, that's what we do in America. Tell me the rules and we're going to do our best to beat the system.
Right.
But I'm going to take it back home just for a second. We don't have enough people for the jobs we have back home. And partially because of these Trump tariffs, we're seeing a big spike in manufacturing. And we can't find the people to answer the orders that we're trying to make. I mean, we're making windows and truck beds and farm machinery, those types of things. So we can't find the people. But if they had no tax on overtime, at least for that first $5,000 or $10,000, they'd be more willing to stay and fill those orders, and that's going to help the economy grow until we can find more people. Now, I've managed a company before. I managed a hospital, my private practice, and when I saw a situation where consistently we were having nurses working overtime, we would get to the point, we're busier, and we're going to go hire another nurse. So we don't have to pay that overtime. So management will respond, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to help grow the economy, especially when we have just a situation and we're not enough people to fill the jobs we have.
So are you guys getting to the other part of my question? How close are you guys just on the tax provisions? You and the House guys, are you you in the Ways and Means Committee? You guys are in the Senate Finance. How close are you to sort of a general understanding of where you want to be? Or are there still differences between what you'll pass and what the House Ways and Means Committee will pass?
Yeah, Sean, I think on the tax side of things, we're in pretty good shape. I bet we're 95% there. I think the big difference to me is a willingness to save Americans money, say on Medicaid and some of those other opportunities out there on food stamps and some of the social programs. We think we could probably save a little bit more money.
All right, I hate to interrupt this conversation, but I just got to tell you, if you, at the end of the day, want a great night's sleep, then join me in having a little scoop of Beams Dream Powder. I do this every night. I'm crushing bags all the time because I need to travel with it now. Beams Dream Powder has been a total game changer for me. Sleep is at the cornerstone of wellness. If you don't get a good night's sleep, everything else falls apart. And I have been taking Beams Dream Powder for months now. I take one scoop at the end of the day. I put it in a cup, put it in the microwave, 30, 40 seconds, take it out. The flavors are amazing. That's coconut cinnamon. I've tried the brownie last night. I've also tried the peppermint. They're all amazing. And I'm not kidding. It's like dessert at night. But the best part is 30 minutes later, you're ready to hit the pillow and go lights out. And then wake up feeling completely energized. It's all natural. It's all the stuff that you've probably tried in like a pill form in the past. Melatonin, magnesium, reishi, L-theanine. It's all there. Reishi. It's all in one amazing tasting blend of all these natural ingredients. I love this stuff. When you wake up, you're focused, you're ready to go. They've like helped 17.5 million nights sleep already. Athletes, professionals, you name it. But here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of 40% off. I mean, 40%, really? Right now, this is awesome. 40% off the best-selling Dream Powder, any flavor you want for a limited time. So go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. And then use code Spicer for 40% off. Support a great American company. Invest in yourself and start getting better sleep tonight. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Code word Spicer. All right, back to the conversation. Okay, so let's focus on that, the spending side, the revenue side. When you say we can save, who is that? Because there's a general perception that the House is saving more money, cutting more spending than the Senate. Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. I think that right now, with the way the majorities are set up, that the Republican Senate is more conservative, fiscally conservative than the House is right now. That the most liberal the most liberal, the most moderate, let's use the word moderate, the most moderate senator on the Republican side is still more conservative than a dozen folks on the House side. The SALT issue is a great issue. We don't have any Republican senators from California, from New York, from Illinois, these high property tax states where SALT's important. So I think that we will be willing to save more money for hardworking Americans than the House is. And I bet that's why we're going to take their bill, make it better, and then send it back to them.
Okay, when you say make it better, because that's actually an interesting dynamic that you're pointing out. The Mike Lawlers from New York and Nick Lolota, and then you got Tom Keene and others, Jeff Van Drew and Young Kim in California, high tax blue states. Yep. You guys don't seem to care about the SALT, but when it comes to actual cutting government spending, okay, is that where are you guys versus the Senate? I mean, versus the House? The House seems to think they're doing more. They say that they're at like 1.5 trillion in cuts. You guys are closer to 250 billion. Is that an accurate portrayal?
No. So the 250 billion number is the minimal. I think my goal is to get over $2 trillion of savings. If we don't get $2 trillion of savings, I don't know how we fulfill President Trump's goals and his priorities, the no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security. So I just don't, as I look at this budget, if we don't get to $2 trillion of savings, I don't know how we pay for all those other priorities, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense, and it's music to my ears. I guess the question is, do you think that like a Susan Collins and a Lisa Murkowski are on board with that?
Yeah, I can't speak for them, but you're absolutely right. That would be our concern. Alaska's in a really unique situation where, they kind of, I'm going to exaggerate, work for 9 months and take 3 months off. So as we go through the work requirements for any type of Medicaid, food stamps, whatever it is, we're trying to make those requirements consistent across all social programs that will need to have amends for Alaska. So each state has their own needs. You heard of the Cornhusker kickback when it came to the Medicaid expansion. You were around then, Sean, or not?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to go back in history and see what type of
Ben Nelson, right? Wasn't that Ben Nelson? He got the Cornhusker kickback.
Exactly. And as I recall, it was Medicaid expansion, perhaps, and they got a sweetheart deal. So we'll see. There's a lot of good things in here. That's my point is, look, the House is going to pass the most conservative bill they can, give the president his priorities, send it to us, and then we're going to make it better, I think, with more spending savings. We'll send it back to them. And I think that it's going to be very hard for them to vote against it. If they have some of their SALT provisions, if they have everything in it, that their priorities, and all we do is find another $500 billion of savings, how is that person going to vote against it? They're going to vote against border security, funding the military. Your taxes are going to go up $2,000 if you don't vote for it. So it's interesting how it all works at the end of the day up here.
One question, when you were talking about working on the farm and your effort to give some relief to overtime. I say this as a guy from like a non-farm state, both Rhode Island and Virginia, although some Virginians probably would argue with that. Is there something unique about being on a farm and overtime that most people probably just don't get, including myself? Like, do you guys work because of the hours? I gotta imagine that's really, that's hard manual labor. And at the end of 8 hours of a regular work day, you're probably pretty exhausted. But is there something unique that, from an overtime perspective, that ties into farm work in particular?
Well, I think it's just the work ethic. We always were salaried, even at a young age. It was a family farm, so it was not much of an hourly wage. Like, I would rather work per bale of hay. So my brother and I hauled a lot of hay. We got a nickel at each bale that we put on the wagon and then got to the barn. And that way we could work as hard as we wanted to and not have to worry about getting paid by the hour. But right now in agriculture, 95% of the labor out there is an hourly wage, and it would be important. It would be very much benefit them as well. So I think there's just a lot of hourly wage workers in agriculture right now. But the owners, the families, of course, they're basically salaried, if you would.
Right. It's funny you mentioned we're $36 trillion in debt. We run about a $2 trillion deficit. your colleague Ron Johnson from Wisconsin tweeted out that at bare minimum, the one big beautiful bill shouldn't increase the annual deficit. With the meager spending reductions being discussed, I'm afraid it will. Do you share that concern?
Absolutely. And Ron John and I are very close. And I think that's what's not been addressed. And I think that's the emphasis to me in yesterday's finance meeting. And then today, another finance committee meeting is, look, we're all ready to spend money. We're all ready to give tax cuts. But I'm not going to do that until I know how much money we're willing to save. And I keep using the word save rather than cut spending. I think that it is saving American taxpayers their money is what I look at it as. So if we can't get to $2 trillion, kind of circle back to that, if we can't get to $2 trillion of savings, I just don't know how we do anything other than permanently extend the current Trump tax cuts.
You know, Senator, it's funny, on 60 Minutes this weekend, there was this woman that was on that was talking about how much that she thinks that there's at least and again, remember, it's 60 Minutes. This isn't exactly friendly, but She was saying that she believes there's upwards of $750 billion in fraud and payments that go out from the U.S. government. And to your point, like, I feel like that a lot of this truly is savings, reforms, getting rid of inefficiencies, finding ways. But if 60 Minutes is doing a prominent segment on the fact that there's $750 billion in improper fraudulent payments alone, that says to me that the more that we go through this budget, that we find programs that are outdated, inefficient, duplicative, that we look at that fraud. If we really put our shoulder to the grindstone, that we could actually come really close to that $2 trillion without affecting any real services that are currently out.
Yeah, bingo. And that's what President Trump has asked us to do, is to find savings but not cut services, so to speak. The Government Accounting Office said, get my numbers right, it's $1 trillion or $2 trillion under Joe Biden of improper payments. That's not fraud, waste, or abuse, but that's just improper payments by the federal government. And again, I'll give Ron John all the credit in the world that we believe in this zero-based budgeting plan. Where you have to go back. I think there's 2,400 line items that Ron John's identified. And really each year you should go back to those line items and say, hey, let's look at last year. Where was that money? Is every dollar accounted for? Can every dollar spent go back to one of these 2,400 line items? And it can't. I'm telling you right now, USAID cannot account for one line item of where any of their spending went to last year. And then justify that spending. And if you can imagine, Sean, if you'd been part of a company for the last 100 years that never cut anything, never cut one program. I ran a business again, and every year you try to cut 5%. Trust me, 5% of where you're spending money is not working. You either need to cut it or reappropriate it to what is working. So we're setting up here on a company. We're spending $7 trillion a year, and we've never got rid of anything. So That's the challenge before us.
I remember my former colleague, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, now the governor of Arkansas, was saying that they just went through and started getting rid of fax lines from all these agencies. Because, I can't remember the last time anyone's faxed anything to anyone because neither side has a fax machine. And yet they had these legacy fax lines that were probably costing the government of Arkansas a ton of money. But your point is so well taken. No one ever stops and says, let's just go back and find out, do we still need this subscription? Do we still need this phone line? Do we still need this office space? Basics aren't even being done.
Yeah, it is that simple. We don't need a rocket science plan, Sean. We need to execute a simple plan well. And the great thing about having a business person in the Oval Office is we're used to, buying a company that's upside down, and you go in there and how do you fix it? Well, the first thing you do is you get rid of the waste, certainly the fraud and the abuse if there is any, but you freeze the hiring. Again, these are simple basics. But we have to have the stomach to do it, though. But the other side of this, Sean, is every day there's 10 new groups in here saying we need to increase spending for this. Yeah. We need more money for cancer research. We need more money to save the children. And I get all that, but I just don't think the federal government is where that money should come from. I think it's more efficient to come from other places, but it is hard right now up here because people are squealing because they're getting some of their government subsidy cut back a little bit, asking them to be more efficient with American taxpayer dollars.
So one of my pet projects has always been, or my pet peeve / pet projects, has been funding for NPR and PBS. Not because of its bias, by the way. I don't really care that it's left wing. I mean, I do, but I think fundamentally, philosophically, the idea that the government of the United States is in the news business is ridiculous. And that funding, and frankly, all these liberal Hollywood folks should fund it if they want. If NPR wants to exist on its own, I have no problem with that. It's a free country. But these to me seem like simple things that just that shouldn't even be a fight within the Republican conference, either in the House or the Senate, and yet somehow it kind of is. So are those things fundamentally, when we kind of look into our crystal ball in a month and a half from now, can we say pretty much unequivocally that there's no question that programs like that will be zeroed out?
You know, Sean, I'm sorry I have to hesitate to even think about that, but it's hard. It's much harder than I was expecting it to be.
Why? Why though?
I just think the special interest groups come up here and beg and cry, and they'll find. So we need 60 senators to vote on most of this stuff, and they'll find 3 or 5 Republicans that won't do it. But we'll see, Sean. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm gonna have to think.
I know, but see, this is the problem. I get it. You and Ron Johnson and others are on the right track. Zero-based budgeting, calling stuff out, and then there's always these 3 or 4 that somehow. And I get some arguments, right? Like there are parochial issues that you probably have in Kansas that Dan Sullivan or Lisa Murkowski have in Alaska. I get that. But I think that there are some fundamental philosophical issues that when you have an R next to your name, you should say, okay, again, for me, NPR and PBS isn't about fundamentally the bias. It's just saying the government of the United States should not be in the news business. And that shouldn't be a Republican that should be that's an easy test for a Republican. Yeah. Is to say, I get it, you're squealing a little because someone from PBS came up to you because they have this great banquet dinner in your your home state that you love to go to every year, but that's really not what we should be focused on. I want to just shift gears though and ask you to put your doctor hat on. Yesterday, the president had this big announcement on pharmaceutical drugs. They call it most favored nation status, meaning that we would pay what the lowest other nation pays for any drug out there. As a doctor, as a guy who's run a hospital, as a businessman, what do you think about his proposal to tackle pharmaceutical prices?
Yeah, Sean, you're the first person to make me answer this question, and it's really tough. The president and I agree that prescription drugs are too high. Okay. I think it's the pharmacy benefit managers that are controlling that system, that they're getting 50 to 70 cents of every dollar are going to these 3 pharmacy benefit managers that control 90% of the market. I just think we have to be careful to not drown out innovation, that if we go to price fixing and eliminate big pharma's profits, then there'll be less investment in the future. And if you want me to say,
can you just explain what they're called PBMs, pharmacy benefit, like the one that what is? So I'm Merck, I'm Eli Lilly, I have a drug. Here's the government. Walk us through. Just explain what you're talking about. Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, and this is one of the most opaque processes that I've ever explained. And I used to teach calculus, Sean, and this is harder than explaining calculus to business people. So let me give this a try. Think of him as a wholesaler, as a middleman.
Okay.
And so big pharma, Merck makes the drug, but they cannot sell it directly to the hospital. They cannot sell it directly to your community pharmacist. They have to, for whatever reason, these PBMs control that market, and they get a percentage of the sale, not a service, like not a $25 for each drug that's sold. They get a percentage of the total cost of that drug, and they constantly push your insurance company, Medicare Advantage, Medicaid, to choose the higher priced drugs, and they use different tiers. So they are incredibly profitable. Their profit margins 50, 60%. 3 of them are on the Forbes top 15 list. And now they're vertically integrated. These PBMs own the pharmacy. They own the insurance company. United Insurance Company has their own PBM. So it is an incestuous process that is controlling healthcare right now. This is if I could only do one thing in my entire history of Congress here, it probably would be to break up the PBMs. I've worked very hard at it. Bernie Sanders and I worked hard at it together. And there's some legislation that we passed out of committee that didn't make it across the finish line last year that's going to be in this reconciliation bill. That's a very long story, complex issue, Sean, and I hope I explained it okay.
You did, and that's the problem, though, is I think that people, like, because I look at this and go, okay, to your point, Merck or Eli Lilly has drug, you guys are the government, and it seems to me as though if there's a problem in the middle, then let's fix the middle, and that's where it is, because I get the president made a very compelling case yesterday, obviously talking about a GLP-1 drug, where he's saying you can buy it for $88 in England, and you're paying $1,300 in the United States. It seems to me, though, we as consumers in the United States are either subsidizing or we're getting the bad deal. I get the competition. I'm all for it. I'm a conservative. But I feel like if you can sell it for $88 in England and $42 in India, then why are we the ones who have to pay the full fare here in the United States?
Yeah, a couple points. Number one, my number one concern is destroying innovation. That if we destroy innovation and you want me to save Medicare, I need a new drug for Alzheimer's. So I need pharmacy to be willing to take that risk. And so far, they're about 0 for 1,000. They've spent hundreds of billions of dollars and really don't have a good drug for it yet. I'm going to back up also, give the president credit here, is that he's always talked about doing work on these PBMs. And I think as I read through the notes on that, I didn't get to see his whole readout of that yet, but he does mention taking out the PBMs as well. I think that's the most important part of it. I don't know how if he can do that or not with executive order. Congress needs to do her job, though. We need to step up, and they are so wealthy that they've given so much money to both parties. Somehow they're still controlling this up here. We need more people, though, that are focused on not the next election, but the next generation. This will be a legacy issue for me if we can get our legislation passed to take out these PBMs.
So what do you think, though, about generally speaking, the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement? Because you're a doctor, you've run a hospital, and this whole thing over the last year has been enlightening to a guy like me, where you realize that it's the care that you get is once you get sick, we take care of you, but we don't do a lot of preventive stuff. From a doctor's perspective and now a legislator's perspective, what can and should we be doing to keep Americans healthy?
Yeah, Sean. So this, again, talk about a legacy issue. This is something I've worked on my entire career. I'm actually an obstetrician, so that nutrition is so important to the outcome of the baby and the mom's health as well. 60% of Americans have a chronic disease right now, and I think a lot of that is driven by nutrition, poor nutrition, and probably toxin exposure. Those two particular things. On the toxin exposure things, I think we're doing much better. That the air, the water is cleaner today than it was when I was growing up. We got a long ways to go, but we are allowing toxins into our food that we're serving people. 70% of America's calories come from processed food. Processed food, if it's in a package, it's been processed. And I don't know if it's the starch that's in it or if it's the dye or what it is that's in it. But at the end of the day, it's actually toxic to our systems. We don't digest it. Our large colon isn't working when we use processed food. So the number one thing we can do to face America's chronic disease epidemic is improve nutrition. And it's a lot more than just calories. It's the quality of the food that we're eating. The other pieces of the puzzle are continue our conservation projects, and we've got my American farmers doing an incredible job on those environmental practices. So we're growing more with less. We're using less fertilizer. We're using less pesticides, all those types of things. We need more access to primary care. Again, something Bernie Sanders and I have worked together on with community health centers. And the last thing I want to address, Sean, is this epidemic of mental health issues for young adults and our adolescents. And I think that's going to go back to putting some guardrails around social media and what our young adults have access to. Just like we had to put tobacco behind the counter, we need to put some of these apps and social media behind the counter as well.
Are you excited about the people? Like you obviously have Dr. Oz at Centers for Medicare. You've got Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. You've got Marty McCary, and now the announcement that Casey Means would serve as Surgeon General. Are they the right people to usher through this agenda?
Absolutely. So these are all people that I've known for years, and this is a priority for them. I think that's the big challenge, Sean. And you understand from your years up here on the Hill, it's about priorities. What do we prioritize? And I think by making this MAHA agenda a priority in each one of those, that's what's going to move the needle here. So take NIH for a second. A focus on. As a physician, I really can't tell you what's in processed foods that's causing the problem here. Is it the food dye? Isn't it? We've left so many of these ingredients we haven't even examined for decades. And so I think that each one of those has their own priority. So I think it's the priority issue. They understand the issue, and they were specifically appointed by President Trump to do exactly that. So I just couldn't be more excited about it.
The last thing I want to ask you about, you mentioned your farmers. The president struck a deal with the UK, and I was having some conversation with folks over the last few days, and they said, well, it's not that big of a deal. And my response was, tell that to farmers, because they got a great beef access into the UK. Are your farmers, where do your farmers come down right now on the current tariffs and the trade strategy is probably how we'll say it. What do they want out of these deals? What do they think about the tariffs and what we hope to gain?
Yeah. So number one, my farmers are patriots. 90% of rural America voted for President Trump, and they're going to hang in there with him. I want to give you the background, though. Under Joe Biden, we saw a record drop in net farm income. So a record drop in net farm income. Whatever Joe Biden was doing was not working. But the bright spot in agriculture right now in Kansas is the cattle industry and the biofuels as well, and the dairy. So cattle, biofuels, that would be the ethanols, and then dairy. And a lot of that is because of what President Trump 45 did. He set up these trade agreements with Japan, South Korea, and Mexico and Canada, and that's really helped our beef markets there. So the UK, though it's not a large market, I still think it's a top 10 opportunity for more beef as well as more ethanol going in there. It's a template, Sean's what I'm trying to say. It's a template that other countries can look at this and say, oh, that's what the president wants, and we can get there on it. And what Europe does is use non-tariff barriers. Don't be focused on the numbers. The UK and Europe basically have used non-tariff barriers to keep all beef. But we don't sell a cheeseburger in Europe right now. So it is not because of the taste of the beef. It's because of their non-tariff barriers.
Right. Senator Dr. Roger Marshall, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And good luck. I appreciate your efforts, your leadership on these tax and spending issues, because we need more people like you that are willing to fight for lower spending, for more tax cuts. And so I know that we're with you on this, and I appreciate your time and your fight.
Sean, thanks so much. Thanks to all your listeners standing behind us. Let's make America great again.
You bet. Take care, Senator.
Thanks.
All right. What a great show. As I reminded you earlier, Steve Moore here tomorrow, Steve Bannon later in the week. Thanks for tuning in. You can always go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up for my newsletter. I'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.